Plastic surgery is supposed to enhance lives, not end them. But one alleged phony doctor's work left a woman clinging to life. A reported fake New York doctor is in custody after allegedly performing illegal plastic surgery procedures that left one woman brain dead. Authorities say 38-year-old Felipe Hoyos Ferronda ran a makeshift clinic out of his home, promising patients enhancements at a fraction of the cost. But instead of beauty transformations, his procedures allegedly led to disaster. Now one woman is fighting for her life, and the so-called doctor tried to flee the country. I'll walk you through the details. For Law and Crime News, I'm Kennedi Walker. Plastic surgery, it's the pursuit of perfection where science meets aesthetics. People pay top dollar to plump their lips, sculpt their bodies, and enhance their curves. But when the price tag for perfection gets too high, some turn to underground procedures, trusting people who claim to have the right touch. And in some cases, like this one, which should have been a routine cosmetic tweak, allegedly turned deadly. In New York, police say a 31-year-old woman is brain dead after a botched butt implant removal performed inside an illegal home clinic. Her name has not been released, but authorities say the man behind the scalpel was Felipe Hoyos Ferronda, a self-proclaimed doctor with no medical license anywhere in the United States. Yet, on social media, he branded himself as a doctor, showcasing before and after transformations on Facebook and TikTok. Pictures and videos show him performing procedures ranging from jawline contouring to under-eye bag removal, all for a fraction of what real professionals charge. In a 2023 TikTok, he even advertised procedures like Botox, lip injections, and microneedling for as little as $1,000. But here's the problem. Investigators say Hoyos Ferronda isn't licensed to practice medicine anywhere in the U.S., and police say he left his latest patient in critical condition. According to a criminal complaint obtained by CBS, on March 28th, the 31-year-old woman visited Hoyos Ferronda to have her butt implants removed. During the procedure, police say he injected her with lidocaine, a local anesthetic used to numb pain. But something went terribly wrong. Instead of waking up with a new look, the woman went into cardiac arrest. At that point, Hoyos Ferronda allegedly called EMS, then fled the scene. When first responders arrived, they reportedly found the woman unconscious. She was rushed to the hospital, but officials say she had no brain activity and showed signs of lidocaine toxicity. According to Medical News Today, lidocaine toxicity happens when too much of the anesthetic enters the bloodstream, causing the heart and nervous system to shut down. When EMS saw the alleged makeshift surgical setup inside Hoyos Ferronda's home, they immediately called the police. Detectives moved quickly. They got Hoyos Ferronda's information from his landlord, and surveillance systems tracked his car near JFK Airport. Authorities say he made it through security and had a ticket to Colombia, but before he could board, Port Authority police swooped in and arrested him. According to court documents, Hoyos Ferronda admitted to performing the procedure without a license. He also allegedly confessed to administering lidocaine via syringe. Now, instead of heading back to Colombia, he's facing serious charges in the U.S. And joining me to talk more about this is New York attorney Aaliyah Roberts. Aaliyah, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's just jump right in. What are the potential penalties for unauthorized medical practice in New York?
There are many of them, right? So you can have a civil penalty or a criminal penalty in New York for for performing surgery, like the doctor did in this case, without an actual license. So from the civil lawsuit, there can be penalties as far as like financial penalties, and they have to pay a fee or pay a fine. In a situation like this, the lawyer who is seeking a civil litigation might also ask for punitive damages to set the precedent that you don't want doctors doing this across New York State. But also on the criminal standpoint, performing surgery without a license is a criminal offense, and you can be imprisoned for that.
Could federal charges come into play, or is this strictly a state level case?
Right now it seems that it's state level, but depending on if a federal prosecutor gets wind of it and might want to set a standard and make sure that they are protecting the citizens of New York State, there is a possibility that they sue it federally. Normally, if you're suing in federal court, there's what's called a federal question, or then you have to have diversity. So that means that both parties are from two different sides or citizens of two different states, which means that, let's say I live in New Jersey, you live in New York, I'm asking for $500 million in damages. That is diversity jurisdiction. I can file a suit in federal court under those terms. But seeing now that the doctor that performed the surgery was a Colombian citizen, there is the potential to bring that, but then you have to talk about the foreignality and whether or not he consented to the personal jurisdiction of the state of New York.
Since the victim is brain dead, could the charges be upgraded to something more severe?
Yes, there you can look at murder. There is murder charges or the potential for murder charges in the specific case, depending on how the court sees brain dead, right? Murder is the intentional killing of another person with malice aforethought. This doctor knew when he was going in to perform the surgery, he was not licensed. He did not know what he was doing. He's not a doctor, right? He's a normal person. There's no difference than me or you getting a needle and a knife and a scalpel and cutting someone open. That is illegal. That's why doctors go to med school and have training and have residencies and all of the additional training that they have.
And then I guess we can just talk more about that. How does the intent factor into the charges? Like, how does intent factor into the charges the defendant is facing?
Well, there's the intent, meaning that I planned on doing that, but there's also recklessness, right? And recklessness also comes into play here because recklessness can also be an element of murder. There's this grave indifference to human life, essentially. In this case, like this doctor who performed this surgery had a grave indifference to human life because you knew there was a risk that this woman could suffer significant consequences. Even if you didn't think that she should die, you should know by performing a medical procedure on a person without a license, there is always that possibility for someone to unfortunately be brain dead in this case or pass away.
If the defendant claimed he was a licensed doctor in Colombia, which that's what he's allegedly saying, does that offer him any legal defense?
Any defense is a good defense, right? You have to have something to provide to the other side, right? The prosecution, no, I'm a doctor. You knew that you were not a doctor in New York State, right? It might help him if he has practiced medicine in New York State at any point, because maybe he came back to the United States prior to this specific instance and he had privileges at a hospital and he has performed surgery. Maybe that's a defense. Oh, I'm a doctor in another country. I've performed surgeries in New York State before. This is not my first time doing this specific procedure. I did not intend to cause this. Based off of my medical training, I could have this defense that I am a doctor. I know what I'm doing, right? There's no way that I thought this person was going to die. But then, there's the other side.
Could he face additional charges for attempting to flee the country, allegedly?
Of course. If you know that you committed a crime and you run away from the scene of the crime, it's no different than leaving the scene of an accident, right? Except that the stakes are a lot higher now because now you know that there is the potential for you to be imprisoned for a long period of time, right? Once the police put out a warrant, the police are looking for you, and then you flee the jurisdiction, that not only means that you have the potential for heightened charges, you also are essentially admitting your guilt. Because if you had nothing to hide, you wouldn't have left the country in the first place.
We touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but can the victim's family sue him for malpractice or wrongful death?
Of course, not only can they sue the individual that performed the surgery, I noticed that in the articles that I was reading about this case, that the landlord also was the individual who informed the police where this doctor was going, right? But if the landlord knew that the doctor was performing these surgeries on his premises in his home, the family should and can also sue the landlord for enabling the doctor to perform these specific procedures.
Well, even let's say hypothetically the landlord says, "No, I had absolutely no idea that this was happening." Does he still have any liability?
Yes, absolutely. This Even if there's this case, or as a landowner has the duty to protect the individuals on their property from foreseeable harms, right? So if you have this tenant here who is doing things that are harmful to the community, you have a duty to act. You have a duty as a landlord to know what the tenants are doing in your specific unit or in your or on your property. It's not that you can say, well, I didn't know and that's it. You will still be named as a defendant in this lawsuit, and discovery will prove that you have some sort of defense to prove that you had no idea that the landlord was performing these specific surgeries. But in and of itself, I didn't know is not a defense in this specific case.
And what could he be charged with, if anything?
The same, all the same things that the doctor would be charged with. The actual landowner could is essentially abling and abetting the doctor to perform these specific medical procedures on your premises. You are essentially committing to the harm. Yeah, it's similar to when a doctor performs a negligent procedure at a hospital and you sue the doctor individually and you also sue the hospital. It's very similar to that.
Gotcha. Well, what legal protections do patients have against unlicensed practitioners?
That's a great question. So on its face, not many, right? Because if you're unlicensed, the argument is, well, what's called assumption of the risk. I knew that you were not a licensed medical professional. I still went to you and had this specific procedure performed, knowing that you were not licensed. I went to this specific location, knowing that it was not a medical facility that was sterile to perform the surgery. So any person who's sued, the first thing that they're going to say is, oh, this plaintiff or this person knew what they were doing because they came to this location that was not a hospital to have surgery. But on the flip side of those things, me as the patient can say, well, this person held themselves out to be a doctor. They showed me their medical credentials. They told me that they were licensed, and I just assumed that they were licensed. I had no reason not to believe them when they told me that they were a doctor.
If the victim sought out the procedure knowing it was unlicensed, like let's say hypothetically the fake unlicensed doctor said, "Hey, by the way, we're doing this off the book." Does that impact the case?
Of course, of course. Now, it impacts it from a civil standpoint because from a criminal standpoint, if a prosecutor chose to press charges or to pursue charges for performing surgery without a license, that is separate and apart from the civil lawsuit. From a civil standpoint, I, as the doctor or as the landlord or whoever is named as a defendant, I'm going to say they knew what they signed up for. You knew what it was when you signed up. And for that reason alone, you are not entitled to any recovery for funds for anything because you should have known by going to the basement or of a home and having a non-licensed doctor perform this surgery, there was a risk to your life. And it's not like we're talking about, some stitches. This woman had a BBL procedure, right? So this is like a serious, serious procedure.
And hypothetically, let's say, patients come forward and say, oh, they had absolutely no idea that the doctor allegedly was not licensed. Could they come together with some type of class action against the doctor, against the landlord, even?
It's possible. Class actions normally have to be certified. So there's a specific type of there are a couple of things that you have to present, right? That you all have a similar you're similarly situated, that the class is included in its entirety. Sometimes judges don't always want to certify a class right away because they want to have an opportunity for other individuals who might have had these procedures performed, something happened to them, to come forward and also sign up. But if there are more individuals out there, there is always a possibility for a class action. Sometimes they will have just multiple plaintiffs and named in the same case, or they'll have one named plaintiff and other plaintiffs will also, be included in the litigation, but not specifically be named.
How would a licensed doctor be charged differently if they had made the same mistake?
Well, a licensed doctor would have what's called malpractice insurance. So that's something as simple as I unfortunately, I did not perform the procedure to the best of my ability. And as a result of that, these individuals sustained harm, right? So when the lawsuit comes, the doctor, the medical professional, will take that lawsuit. They will send it to their malpractice insurer, and the insurance company for the doctor for the medical malpractice, the malpractice insurance, will assign counsel to the doctor. That's the whole point of insurance in cases such as these. So the doctor is not as concerned or overwhelmed because I pay for insurance. This is what my insurance is supposed to cover. I will have my insurance company assign me counsel, and then we'll go forward and defend the lawsuit.
And the defendant was reportedly posting his work on his social media pages, on TikTok, on Facebook. What role will the social media posts play in the prosecution's case?
Well, to that point, you are holding yourself out to be a medical professional, which you are not, right? That's especially for talking from a criminal standpoint. You are representing to the world that you are a licensed doctor who is capable of performing medical surgery. You are capable of taking a scalpel, putting someone under anesthesia, doing the work necessary to perform the surgery. And you are not, right? Especially if you're not licensed in New York State, at least. You might be licensed in another country, but you don't have privileges in the state of New York to perform those surgeries.
If you were the defendant's defense attorney, how would you fight this? What would you do?
I think that I would play into the role of BBL culture being performed by non licensed medical professionals all over the country. I think that I would kind of paint it out as this woman knew the risk. She assumed the risk of getting this surgery because when you showed up to the location, you saw that it was not a hospital. When you went downstairs, I am sure that it was not set up like it was not a sterile, clean environment. There were so many steps that could have happened before this woman actually said, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. Right? The famous rapper Cardi B talks about how she had a BBL done in the basement in a building in Queens. Right? So knowing that there are people that are doing this all over the country and celebrities as well, it's like, okay, you signed up for this, right? You knew what you were doing. You knew what it was when you signed up, and you still continued to have this procedure done. Unfortunately, you assume the risk of these consequences. That's what I would do as the defense attorney.
And hypothetically, if the defendant, had his patients sign some type of waiver or something, could that be upheld in court given the fact that he's not a licensed professional, or could it still be since a person hypothetically signed something?
Well, I think that might be something that has to go to the jury. On its face, right? We have what's called the four corners rule. So you look at the four corners of the contract. Now, if the waiver said that you were receiving medical care from a licensed medical professional, then arguably no, the waiver should not be upheld because I signed a contract with a doctor and this individual is not a licensed doctor. He's not licensed in the state of New York. So arguably that might not come into play, but if it just said I agree to have procedures performed by the named defendant and it didn't say that it was medical care, arguably, yes. If the waiver is written in a way that does not say that you're getting medical care from a licensed doctor, arguably that waiver can stand up in court.
What if it says hypothetically, which I don't know any of this, I'm just asking
Yeah,
questions because I know a lot of
of
people
course.
want to know. What if it hypothetically said you're getting care from a doctor that's licensed in Colombia?
I mean, on its face, you should have read that, you should have seen that, and that should have given you pause, right? Because number one, most people don't read waivers. You go to the gym, you Apple, whatever you do, you don't read the waiver, you just sign it and you proceed. But if that waiver specifically said that you were receiving licensed care from a doctor in Colombia and not a doctor licensed in New York State, and you signed it, that then goes back to our assumption of the risk argument I was saying before.
Could he argue that the victim's death was an unforeseen medical complication rather than negligence?
No, because anytime you are cutting someone or performing any type of medical procedure, there is always the risk that something nefarious, something horrible can happen, right? In this case, this woman is now brain dead. There's always the risk in any type of medical procedure. People have passed away from getting dental work done, right? Because there are certain nerves in the mouth that then connect to other parts of your body, including your heart. Right. So there's so many things about the human body and how all of our nerves are connected. Now there's so many blood vessels. So knowing that, especially because he is a doctor somewhere, just not in New York, there's always the risk that can happen. So no, it's not just it's medical malpractice, but you also it's more than just negligence.
Could he potentially face lesser charges if he cooperates with authorities?
I think so. Yes. I mean, there's that opportunity, unless you get a prosecutor that wants to make him an example. And we all know that sometimes is the case, right? You have situations where you see a case and on its face, it doesn't seem like it's something that should be getting as much media attention as it is. But if the prosecutor wants to set a standard to make sure that you can't just come in from another country and decide that you want to perform surgery in someone's basement, I would argue that's a good precedent to set. I would argue that I want a prosecutor to make sure that that is, the standard across the states. And if you do that, you'll be penalized for it.
What should people look out for to avoid falling victim to fake doctors.
So, especially when we're talking about any type of medical procedure, any type of surgery, you want your surgeon to be certified by the board of whatever specialty it is. So, you have the American Medical Association, so you want your doctors to be affiliated with that organization, but there's also specific specialties, right? There's a plastics board. So, we're talking about cosmetic surgery. There's a board for plastic surgeons. There's a board for orthopedic surgeons when you're talking about replacing bones, or there's a board for cardiac surgeons, right? And there's also additional medical training when you sign up or you look up a doctor online. They have where the doctor went to school. But there's also a different clinics or medical residencies that they did in addition to their standard 4-year residency that hopefully they have when you're looking for that type of procedure. So if I'm looking at a plastic surgeon, I want to know, well, after your residency, did you do an additional year in plastics, studying under another licensed board certified surgeon?
Do you think what happened kind of just shows where we are as a society? I mean, I know you just mentioned Cardi B and saying in one of her songs that she got some type of procedure done in a basement. Can you just break that down? And what do you think is really going on right now in our society to where people are wanting to
Yeah.
get these things done?
Yeah. I think let's be clear. Plastic surgery has been around since the beginning of time, right? It didn't just transform overnight. But I'd argue in maybe the last 10 years, maybe the last 15, but I'd say the last 10 for sure, we're seeing this uptick in girls who want the zero waist, they want 40-inch hips, triple D, Dolly Parton, super large boobs. And I think it has to play with kind of what's being shown to us from a media standpoint. I think that women want a specific body and they don't want to pay the price of how much it costs. Like anything, right? I want to look like this, but I don't want to pay for it. I don't want to go to the gym. I'd rather get a surgeon. And that's fine. But you also have to be mindful of this is a medical procedure, just like open heart surgery, just like brain surgery, just like anything else. And you need to do due diligence so you don't end up in a coma or brain dead. And it's really, really important because you're looking out for you. No one else is looking out for you. You have to do your due diligence when you're doing a surgery, especially something that's cosmetic, right? It's not needed. You didn't need the surgery. You wanted the surgery. So do the extra work to make sure that you're protected.
Absolutely. And do you think that because of this and because of this just plastic surgery culture, that there are people out there that are preying on women, preying on men, and that's how they're able to go around to have these cheap procedures?
Definitely. I know individuals. I'm a licensed attorney. I have friends who are not, professionals in the same way, but they went to Tijuana to get work done or went to DR to get work done. And thankfully, they're okay. But my first question was, are you sure you want to do that? And you don't know how licensed they are and you don't speak the language and you just want to go because it's $10,000 cheaper in those specific countries than it is in the United States? There's a reason for that, right? They're preying on you. They're on TikTok, they're on Instagram, they're on all of these social media sites showing you the best case scenario, but they're not going to show how many people did not recover, right? I think K. Michelle had this show called Botched. It was on
Oh,
VH1. I
I
don't know if
saw
it's still on
that. I
VH1.
saw that.
Yes, and it
Yes.
talks about these women who go and get these procedures in basements or by non-licensed surgeons or non-licensed medical professionals, and they have to deal with the consequences forever. It's not like they can fix it once it's broken, right? And even if they can fix it, you're now spending even more money because now you have a board certified plastic surgeon. You're spending more money to fix what wasn't broken in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, I hope that one person just takes from this and they learn that if you want to get plastic surgery, that's fine, but make sure that your doctor is certified. Thank you so much,
Correct.
Aaliyah, for coming on today.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Hoyos Ferronda has been charged with second-degree assault, which is a felony, as well as unauthorized practice of a profession. Hoyos Ferronda pleaded not guilty and was ordered held without bail. For Law and Crime, I'm Kennedi Walker.